All right. Good afternoon, everybody. What we're going to look at today is how to configure and set up an operating system such as Windows 7 or 2008 R2 to boot from a native VHD file. This is a new feature that was brought out with Windows 7 and 2008 R2. It's got a lot of advantages to it, so hopefully this will help you out and take a look at some of those features. So what we're going to look at here is the basic concept of booting from a VHD, some of the benefits of it, some of the limitations of it, operating systems that support it, the types of VHDs you can actually create and play with, and then lastly what we'll do is actually install an operating system inside a VHD so you can see the steps necessary to configure this. So, first off here, the basic difference, obviously, of installing an operating system to a VHD file rather than installing it directly to a hard drive. Obviously, with a hard drive, you're dealing with installing the operating system to a physical volume. You open up that volume and you see all the raw files and folders sitting there, your basic Windows program files, users folder. When you install to a VHD, you're actually installing to an individual file itself. So when you open up the physical hard drive, you don't see all of your Windows folders, program files. You mainly just see that one nice compartmentalized VHD. Now there's going to be some boot files and stuff there as well, but those are mainly hidden. So this is really nice for compartmentalizing the operating system to provide you an easy way of potentially backing up that operating system, moving the operating system to another machine in terms of cloning if you want to. It's got a couple nice features that I think a lot of people can take advantage of. Now, some of the benefits, obviously, of this. First off, there's no need anymore to create multiple partitions if I want to have a multi-boot environment. Previously, if I wanted to have a machine that booted up lots of different operating systems, it was highly recommended that you had each operating system contained in a separate physical volume. It's not a big deal, but it's one of those things, if you don't plan ahead sometimes, it's not as easy to repartition your drive and install a new operating system. With VHD files, I can have one big volume and just install each operating system into a separate VHD file contained in that volume whenever I see fit. If I want to add more operating systems or remove them, I can do it at any time I want to and not affect my actual partitioning of the drive itself. Backing up the operating system, no longer do I actually need to use a custom backup utility which takes the OS and basically compresses it down to a nice compressed file, or even imaging options that a lot of people like to use, because we're actually installing the operating system to a pre-installed compressed file. So I just need to back up an individual file and I literally get my entire operating system. Using differencing VHDs to create test environments and potentially for easier system recovery is an option that we'll explore a lot later, because that really does merit having its own video tutorial. But feel free to look into that, and we'll put something up about it later because it's pretty impressive. If you have existing Windows image files that you've created for previous operating system deployments, you can apply those Windows image files to a VHD and then deploy the VHD to your computers so that they boot directly from that virtual hard drive file. So just potentially an easier way of deploying the Windows image files that you currently have. Now, some of the limitations of this, depending on your environments, these might cause a problem. First off, no hibernation support. So if this is a laptop machine and you like using the hibernate option on a laptop, well, native boot from a VHD is apparently not going to work for you. You can't have VHD files nested within other VHD files. Shouldn't be a problem for most people. BitLocker, again, a lot of times for laptop drives, if you want to secure your operating system or the actual physical hard drive using BitLocker so the entire drive is encrypted, this is not something you can do if you want to boot from a native VHD. So unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with having an unencrypted drive potentially. The hard drive containing the VHD can't be a dynamic disk, which means if you want to use software RAID or some of the other options that dynamic disks provide, it's not going to be available if you want that drive to be containing a VHD file. The actual VHDs themselves can't be dynamic disks, so you won't be setting up software RAID using your VHD files. They're basic disks only. And the one nagging thing my personal opinion, is you can't use a VHD file and boot from a removal device. So if I put a VHD drive or file on a USB thumb drive or a USB hard drive, I can't boot a machine currently from that. Microsoft doesn't support it at this point in time, is not allowed. Hopefully, sometime down the future, that'll actually be available to you. Now, the supported operating systems to get this done, pretty basic. Windows 7 Enterprise and Ultimate, the only two editions that actually support this. 64 and 32-bit editions, perfectly fine, either one you want to go with. And 2008 R2 Server. Now, 2008 R2 is only 64-bit, so that's all you're going to have for an option there. But any of those three, at this point in time, are the only ones that actually support it by Microsoft. So hopefully you have one of those. Now, the types of virtual hard drive files that are available to install your operating system into. The first one is by far the most common and recommended to use, which is just a fixed size VHD. What this means is when I create the VHD, it allocates the space that I specify in terms of the size of the VHD immediately on the physical hard drive. So if I create a 30 gig VHD, 30 gigs of space is immediately taken on my physical drive, and I've got one, for all intents and purposes, nice contiguous block of data on that hard drive. For virtual hard drive files, this is essentially the fastest performance you can get because it is a nice contiguous block of data, and it's much preferred to use if you're going to be booting your operating system off of it, because performance is usually something people like to see. Dynamically expanding. As the name states, this is a VHD that will expand as it needs new space or more space. So you would give it a maximum amount of size, say again 30 gigs, but it would actually only take the space as the data is put inside the VHD. So if you do a basic Windows 7 install that's roughly between 8 and 12 gigs in size, that VHD will only have between 8 and 12 gigs until you start adding programs and putting more data into it, and it will grow and takes the space as needed. These obviously help you save a little bit of space, but don't perform quite as well as fixed size disks, simply because they have a tendency of fragmenting themselves because they do take the space as they need to. And at this point in time, honestly, you can go to Newegg and get a 3 terabyte disk for, what, $120 now? So it really shouldn't be too much of a problem in terms of disk space. Differencing disks. These work with a parent disk, so I can actually start having multiple versions of my operating system booting from different differencing disks to provide different configurations. It's a really interesting option, and we will look a lot more into this later, but like I said before, it really does merit having its own section to talk about. So for now, we're going to hold off on that, and then we'll put up another section on that later. Hopefully you'll check it out. So what we're going to do now is actually switch over to a machine and actually run through the steps of installing the operating system in a VHD, so you get a basic idea on actually how easy it is to do. It's one of those things where there are some command line options to it. It's not right in your face when you install the OS, so you do need to be aware of how to get this done at first. So hang on for 1 second. We're going to switch over there and continue on. Alright, so here we are with machine booted up right into the basic setup screen of Windows 7. So what we're going to do is create a virtual hard drive file on this machine and install the operating system to it. At this point, this machine has a completely blank hard drive. There's a 0 on it, no partitions, no volume, no nothing, so we're going to have to set everything up from scratch. Now to do this, first thing we want to do is open up a command prompt. To open up a command prompt inside the setup menu, press Shift F10. And that brings up my basic command window. Now from here, I'm going to need to open up diskpart. If I spell it correctly, would be extremely beneficial. Once we get into diskpart, this is where we're going to create a partition on my blank disk, and then this is actually also we're going to be creating the virtual hard drive file that I'm going to install the operating system to. But one thing I want to do before we look at diskpart here, just so you see what we're actually going to get done with here, if I exit out of this and just start stepping through the installation of Windows 7 at this point, give it a second, of course. And of course we accept the license terms. If I do a custom advanced install, what we see right now is disk 0, completely unallocated space. So like I said, no partitions, no nothing. This is where we're starting with. So if we open up a command prompt again, get back into disk part, we'll actually see what the changes that we're going to make are. So inside disk part, we're going to want to create a new partition on this disk. So just for fun, we'll list the disks. I see currently one disk, which is disk 0, 65 gigs in size. So I select disk 0 because this is the one that I want to work with. I'm going to create a partition on this disk as a primary partition. Fantastic. List the partition to see what's there. Currently I have one partition, which is a primary partition, partition 1. You can see the asterisk next to it, which means it is currently selected. So I'm going to format the partition NTFS. And of course we're going to make this a quick format because I don't think you want to be sitting here for God knows how many hours. Fantastic, formatting's done. We're going to assign it a drive letter. So now I can list the volume, and we'll see currently I have a C drive, which is volume 1, 64 gigs in size, which is what I just created. Now what we're going to do is create a virtual hard drive on this volume. So first off, create virtual disk. The file that I want this disk to actually be is going to be the C drive win7.vhd. The type of the file I want to be a fixed size dynamic disk, so we'll say a fixed size disk. And the maximum amount of size I want it to be at this point in time is going to be just 25 gigs. So this is creating, basically this is saying, create a virtual disk file, name of win7.vhd, which is going to be a fixed size VHD with a maximum size of 25 gigs. Once I do this, it'll actually start the creation process, which only takes a little bit of time. It starts off slow, but it ends up quick. So we'll give it a couple seconds here, and it should be done relatively quickly. All right, and look at that, we're already up to 99%. Admittedly, I did pause that so you didn't have to go through the painfulness of watching all of those. Percentage point goes up. So we have a virtual disk file now, 25 gigs in size, 100% completed. So what we're going to do here is select, I actually put it in here. So we're going to select the virtual disk that I just created. We're going to attach the virtual disk. And now I can actually list the disks in the machine, which we'll now see I actually have two of them listed. Disk 0 being the actual physical volume of 65 gigs. Disk 1 being the virtual disk, which is currently listed as 24 gigs with 24 gigs of free space. Now I can exit out of disk part, exit out of the command prompt, and back to the installation. Now when I refresh this, what I see now, once it comes up, is disk 0 partition 1 is my 65 gig disk that I created, and here's the actual VHD file that we created as 25 gigs. So this is what I'm going to want to install to. Now this is something that pops up as well. Whenever you do this, you're always going to see this prompt down at the bottom that says Windows cannot be installed to this disk. For whatever reason, I haven't looked into it. That always pops up. It's a known issue. It's not a problem at all. We're going to install to this disk, and it's going to accept it perfectly fine. So, click Next. We're going to install to the disk, and I am going to pause it here only because I don't think you need to sit here and watch as it expands and puts these options on. So, once something interesting comes back, I'll make sure to unpause it, and we can continue on from there. Alright, so Windows has just finished installing. The desktop has just appeared. So we're going to take a quick look here. Open up the computer, and what we see are two drives. Essentially I only have one physical drive in here. The D drive is representing my actual physical drive. The C drive is the virtual hard drive file. And of course, when I open up the virtual hard drive file, I see the folders and information I would normally see when I open up any other C drive. When I took a look at the D drive, what I actually see at this point in time is just the single VHD file that is actually representing the C drive. A better representation of this is if I look at, I open up Control Panel here, open up Administrative Tools and take a look at Computer Management. Inside Computer Management, I can look at Disk Management. Now, this is actually going to give me a slightly better view of exactly what's going on. All right, now that Disk Management is finally opened up, we can take a look, and if you look very closely here, Disk 1, which is my virtual hard drive file, is shown with this little blue icon here, and that's actually a virtual hard drive. Disk 0 is listed with your standard gray disk icon, which is your standard type hard drives. The disks themselves up here don't really look much different. You have your C drive, you have your D drive, both NTFS, information is all there. It's just here where you really only see the subtle difference of having a blue icon versus a gray icon. And again, back inside my computer, we see the two disks as if they're two separate drives. But what we're actually looking at is the contents of this specific virtual hard drive file. So this just basically shows you at this point in time how to set up a machine to boot off of a native virtual hard drive file. And later on, we're going to look at some other options in terms of cloning the virtual hard drive file to move it to other machines to boot from, provide a cheap way of basically imaging these options, using differencing disks with these virtual hard drive files to provide a testing and a development environment that's relatively easy, and a couple other interesting options as well, working with WinPE inside virtual hard drive environments. So stay tuned. Hopefully you check some other stuff out, and if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at jay.cline@americaninteractive.com. So again, hope you enjoyed, got some useful information out of it, and I'll be seeing you later. Take it easy.